Hello class, and this is Lucy Diaz, and I will present you my fun story named The Legion of Honor. I chose time and order to tell it because it is the most common pattern present in the entire story. I hope to be clear, and I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you. The Legion of Honor. How we got the Legion of Honor? Ever since he was a child, Mr. Kyer had only had one idea in his head: to wear the ribbon of an order. When he was still quite a small boy, he used to wear a thin cross of the Legion of Honor pinned on his tunic. But years later, his studies were not a success, and he failed in his examination for Bachelor of Arts. So, not knowing what to do, he married a pretty girl as he had plenty of money of his own. Later, they moved to Paris, where they live as many rich middle-class people do, mixing with their own particular set. They felt proud of knowing a deputy who may perhaps be a minister someday, and also of having two heads of departments at France. However, he felt constantly unhappy because he had not the right to wear a little bit of colored ribbon in his buttonhole. Sometimes in the afternoons, he walked on the boulevards, or he went to certain cafes or theaters to look the officers and knights with intense jealousy. He was always walking slowly to look at every coat with a practiced eye for the little bit of the red ribbon. One day he returned angry and frustrated to his house because he had not the right to wear any decoration. So he asked his wife to talk with Mr. Rosalind, the deputy, to advise him how to apply for being an officer of the academy. Following day, Madame Rosalind did what he asked her, and Mr. Rosalind promised her to speak to the minister about it. However, it's important to remember that Mr. Kyer was not even Bachelor of Arts. A week later, Mr. Rosalind called Mr. Kyer, inviting him to present his proposals. The instruction of children by means of the eye, gratuitous theaters to be established in every poor quarter of Paris for little children, and a street London library, which was to have little pushcarts full of books drawn about the streets. Everyone will have a right to 10 volumes a month in his house on payment of only $1. But the weeks passed and he didn't get an answer. One day at noon, he was having lunch in a restaurant when Mr. Rosalind arrived and told him, "The Committee of Historical Works is going to entrust you with a commission. There are some researches to be made in various libraries in France." That afternoon, Mr. Kyer felt very, very happy. A week later, he set out He went from town to town, studying catalogs, rummaging in lofts full of dusty volumes. But one day, he had the idea of taking the last train to surprise his wife, whom he had not seen for more than a week. So, at 9 o'clock, Mr. Kayak took the train and arrived at home at midnight. He had his key, so he went in without making any noise, delighted at the idea of the surprise he was going to give her. She had locked herself in, so he cried out through the door, "Jane! It is I!" She must have been very frightened, for he heard her jump out on her bed and speak to herself as if she were in a dream. Then she went to her dressing room, opened it, and closed the door, and went quickly up and down her room barefoot 2 or 3 times, shaking the furniture till vases and glasses sound. Then, at last, she asked, "Is it you, Alexander?" Then she opened the door with a very surprised face. He began to undress himself methodically, but his eyes stopped in a red ribbon in the buttonhole that was in a coat. A red ribbon of the Legion of Honor! He knew that it was not of him, and he started many questions. But his wife told him that it was a surprise that Mr. Rosalind was preparing for him. She told him that Mr. Rosalind wanted to decorate him in some weeks, and that it supposed that could not know until he returned from his business journey. It has been the best night for him. Mr. Kayak couldn't believe it. It was his dream, and his friend, Mr. Rosalind, had obtained it for him. Then he drank a glass of water, while a piece of white paper fell to the floor out of the pocket of the overcoat. Kayak picked it up. It was a visiting card, and he read out, "Rosalind Deputy." He almost cried with joy, and a week later it was announced in the Journal official that Mr. Kayak had been awarded the Legion of Honor on account of his exceptional services. Thank you very much.